I was so unprepared to use that. Thank you for joining us here on the Cover One Roundup. Good evening to each and every one of you. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen. We are here to talk about everyone's favorite thing, which is the AFC East. I don't know if that's everyone's favorite thing, but it's my favorite thing right now because we're talking about it. We're going to break down each team. More specifically, what we're going to do is develop best and worst case scenarios for each team in the division. Now, the thing is, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, for 3 of these teams, the best case scenario is going to be winning the division and maybe even going to a Super Bowl and winning a Super Bowl. For one of these teams, we will have nice things to say about you, I promise you, but our expectation of you is very low. So don't get too mad at us if you feel like we're underrating you. I promise it's justified. But before we get too far into things, Uber, how are you this evening?
Oh, I'm great. Happy Monday. It's sunny out here. I got a beer in hand. I'm talking about football, and I actually love this topic. I love talking about the other AFC East teams because it's a good opportunity to kind of level set or correct myself as a Bills fan and not just be like, yeah, the Bills are going 17-0, going to win the Super Bowl. No one in the division is going to win a single game. Like, this is a good conversation.
Well, and this was actually at least partially, inspired by something that you had tweeted out, which yesterday, which was any reasonable Bills fan should be able to make a legitimate argument that Jets or Dolphins can win the AFC East. Which is true, and that's exactly what we're going to end up doing today. And it's going to be important to look into exactly how these different teams have built their rosters, how their rosters will be able to compete with the Bills in particular, since the Bills are the reigning champions of the AFC East, and they're going to be going for 5 straight now. Which is a weird, crazy thing to think about. Just in general, right? Like most of my lifetime was spent growing up, like seeing the Bills as just mediocre and bad. I would have been, and I was happy the first time that they won the AFC East, right back in 2020. To think that they have now won 4 straight, and especially considering where they were in the middle of last year with all the injuries and being 6-6, it was like, all right, so maybe they get the 7th seed or something. I don't know. And then they end up getting the 2 seed and winning the division. So there's a lot to be said about that. But before we get too deep into this, which is like the third time I've said that right now, we got some business to take care of. The first of which is going to be taken care of by our wonderful friends Greg and Aaron at the Cover One flagship show.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for their wonderful read every time on that. Immaculate, as always. We are also brought to you by the wonderful folks over at Underdog Fantasy. Folks, we're getting to the point now. We're in post-draft, which means if you're in dynasty leagues, you're getting ready to make your rookie draft picks, or maybe you're just waiting to do the whole thing. Maybe you're in a whole redraft league. Whatever it is, Underdog is for you, because if you just have that one home league and it's not enough for you, then you can go to Underdog Fantasy and you can go have all the fun of drafting your own players but without the waivers and lineup decisions, because best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your team, all the chances to win big with none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. I have a bowl of, this is completely off topic, by the way. have a bowl of nuts here, and I'm realizing that they have nothing on them. They're literally just nuts. There's no salt, there's no like flavoring. It's literally just nuts, and I feel like I have betrayed myself, if we're being honest, by not reading what was on whatever packaging this was. I am disappointed immensely in myself. I'm also disappointed that this exists at all. I understand there's a purpose behind it. I'm sure there are people who are perfectly content with just plain nuts of some sort. I am not one of those people because I like flavor. So, will that stop me from eating it? No.
It'd be like having a beer without alcohol. It's like,
I mean, hey,
what's the point?
I got my. It's, I don't know. Can we really see that? You can kind of vaguely tell. It says Bills. This is a Bills mug. You can't. It's very faded on this side, but you can see that.
Beers and flavorless nuts. I mean, what a combo.
Exactly. We're gonna get into some comments here. Just the tip of canoe, what it do? Still one of my favorite names on here that I see every week. Vladimir, let's go Bills. As C Rose says right there. Drew Castiglia, best case 13-4, worst case 6-11. That's my take. It's also too early in the show to be talking about eating nuts. Maybe for you, never for me. A healthy Rodgers and a healthy Breece Hall should add several wins for the Jets minimum. You know, Breece Hall was healthy for last year. Played great for them. But I think that, yes, obviously a healthy Aaron Rodgers, assuming he is the Aaron Rodgers that we think he can be. I mean, you're raising your floor by a significant degree. Like, it's actually, you're talking about potentially like what? 4 or 5 wins, I think, just right off of that, assuming the other parts are what we think they should be. That's crazy. Joe DeRosa, the worst case scenario, these dudes spilled their beers. He's not wrong. That would be the worst case scenario. I'd be very grumpy if that actually happened, because I don't normally do anything in here involving food, but I really wanted beer when I did this, so we're gonna do it. All right, where do you want? Do you want to start? Do you want to start with the Bills, or do you want to start at the bottom with the Patriots? The spoiler alert: the Patriots are going to be at the bottom of this.
Let's start with the Bills, right? There's people listening. Sure. Let's start with the Bills.
Let's start with the Bills. So, the Buffalo Bills, our favorite team. So I understand if there are people who feel down on the Bills, given the talent exodus that has happened with this team, right? They offloaded a lot of players who have been on this team for a while. Some guys with expiring contracts left. It's tough, right? Micah Hyde is no longer on the team, although he is still a free agent. They could theoretically bring him back, though at this point I don't really see a point in doing that. At cornerback, they get rid of Trey White, who played 4 games for them last year, was great in those 4 games, and unfortunately got hurt again. Mitch Morse, starting center, stalwart for that offensive line, now gone. There are a lot of Gabe Davis left in free agency. Stephon Diggs gets traded. A lot of players, a lot of leadership walks out the door or is forced out the door in some form or another. So I understand the feeling if people maybe want to use this chance to be like, hey, if the Jets are healthy, they're winning this division. I get that. I understand that thought process. I can, I guess, sort of buy into this feeling that maybe the Dolphins are like, this is the year. If there's a time to do it, it would be this year, right? Bills might not be as good as they've been in the last 4 years. Maybe this is our chance to take that next step forward. But for now, I think that until I see a reason to not have the Bills as the AFC East champions, why would I take them out?
Yeah, I completely agree with that too. And even with that tweet I had put out saying you should be able to create a rational argument, I still think the Bills are going to win the AFC East. And I think the smart bet is the Bills winning the AFC East, because at the end of the day, all the names that you just talked about that they lost are big, and Stephon Diggs as well. they still have Josh Allen. They still have the pedigree in the AFC East. They still have an immense amount of talent on this roster. And I do think you're right about one thing in particular. This is the year for the Dolphins and Jets to go get the Bills. Like, if you're going to get the Bills, it's right now. It's this year. It's 2024, because next year, when they've already reset their cap, they have a good amount of draft capital going into next year's draft. The Bills' next year's version of them are going to probably be better than this year's version of them. So right now, I'm with you. The Bills should be the favorite. This should be the team that people are betting on. I trust them to still win the division until proven otherwise. But there are legitimate paths where the Dolphins and Jets could prove me otherwise.
There absolutely is, and we'll get into that when we talk about those teams in particular. But for the Bills, I mean, even with all the talent leaving, it's not like they just had a bunch of players leave and that was it, right? They brought in guys that they like Curtis Samuel. They they bring back Taylor Rapp, who, obviously there are people who have mixed opinions about him. I think some of it is a bit unwarranted, but that's, to be determined, essentially. You bring in DeJuan Smoot, you have Casey Toohill, who are nice rotational guys on the defensive line, along with Deshaun Williams. I have the depth chart in front of me right now. That's why I'm able to remember these names this time around. And even bringing in someone like Lyle Collins as like a swing tackle type, right? Like that's good insurance to have on the offensive line, especially for an offensive line that, like we've pointed out before, had health all throughout, right? Like they were healthy in all 17 games. They played all 17 games together. The odds of that happening again, very, very low. So that was a move that felt like, okay, they recognize that and they're willing to do something about it. Even somebody like Mac Hollins, right, who's definitely a depth receiver, is not really going to like be a big impact player on offense, but is somebody that brings a lot of leadership, which when you talk about the talent that's left, a lot of leadership went with it, right? Like all of those guys that left, Poyer, Hyde, Morris, Diggs, Davis, White, all of those guys have been captains for this team at some point or another. And so you need to bring in a big infusion of leadership across the board. Saron Neal, a special teams guy, another guy that left. Mac Hollins comes in. He's been a captain before, a special teams captain. You bring him in to kind of fill that sort of role and that sort of void. And then you take some flyers on other guys like Quintez Cephas and Chase Claypool even, which I don't really get because I think we all know what Chase Claypool is at this point in his career, but that's neither here nor there. Regardless of all that, though, like, there's still talent on this roster. Legitimately good, strong talent on this roster. It is a team and a coaching staff that can legitimately win this division. And the biggest part of that is always going to be Josh Allen. As Steve Noble says, it feels like the Bills are now 100% Josh Allen's team now. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, given the shift that they've had offensively towards running the ball a bit more. I would honestly say in like 2020 and 2021, I'd say that was, especially 2021, my gosh, when they just couldn't run the ball to save their lives for most of the season. But I do understand that notion, though, right? That because they've sort of offloaded these receivers, and in particular Diggs, that they're essentially trusting Allen to just elevate everyone else around him, which typically he does and has done throughout his career. I don't know if your YouTube algorithm works the same as mine, but the NFL channel posted an hour-long video of Josh Allen highlights, which, first of all, is like only touchdowns, which is hilarious that he has enough touchdowns to fill an hour-long compilation. But also, I was like, there's more than just touchdowns that we can highlight for this guy, right? Like when they showed the receiving touchdown he had against Houston in the playoff game. There's a big like 40-yard run that happens on the first play of the game that they don't show because it's not a touchdown. I'm like, but that's such a great play. Anyway, but regardless of all that, like, Josh Allen is gonna be the guy, and he always will be the guy because that's the sort of player that he is. And I think that having Khalil Shakir and Curtis Samuel are good, like, in my mind, at least reliable options. Dalton Kincaid figures into that as well. Yeah. You've been on the wagon that Dawson Knox has been underrated as part of the equation here.
Oh my gosh, yes, wholly underrated.
Talk more about that, because yeah. I tend to agree with you on this.
Look, Knox did not have a good year last year. A lot of it did have to do with injuries. He hurt his hand early on, had to try to play through it. A lot of the drops probably were a result of that injury. Not all of them. Some of them were probably focus drops. A la James Cook having focus drops is another topic that I won't necessarily dive into. But this idea that Dawson Knox is just going to be a second-class citizen on this roster and play a role similar to that of Quentin Morris is absurd to me. Like, I expect Dawson Knox to push well over 50% of snap shares this year. Like, he's going to get his snaps, and I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up 400, 500 yards through the air, just because all the focus now is going to shift to probably Dalton Kincaid, because I think right now he's their one. Maybe Keon Coleman comes out and flashes early. Maybe Curtis Samuel becomes this deep threat. Like, Dawson Knox is going to be the guy lost in all the process that's happening underneath here, and he might be able to slip out from time to time, or in the red zone be a massive part of the Bills' offense, because he can go and find those spots, and Josh has a rapport with him. And if there's one thing that Josh has proven to us time and time again, is his rapport with his receivers is critical for how often he's throwing the ball to his receivers. So that history of Dawson Knox, I think, is going to be a big deal this year. And I do think it's kind of wild, people writing him off. You can be upset with his contract. You can be frustrated with that contract. But at this point, he's not going anywhere. He's on the roster. So look at him as a realistic option for Josh Allen. And really, Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, that's one of the better 1-2 punches at tight end in the NFL. Even though people don't want to say it because they're like, oh, Dawson Knox sucks. He does not suck. He's a top 32 tight end in the NFL. Like, he's a top 32 tight end. So I expect him to be a big part of this offense. And they have the weapons, even though they don't have the weapon, the absolute fucking like cannonball of a Stephon Diggs. They have a lot of really good players. And I'm interested to see Josh Allen now look at this offense, step back the pass, and be like, my first read isn't Diggs. My first read's somebody else. And maybe that opens up things. Maybe that causes defenses to panic a little bit more, because they can't key on one guy now. Like, they legitimately can't. They can try on Kincaid maybe, but if they key on one guy, they have just such a plethora of weapons that are good enough to win against NFL caliber talent that I think this offense theoretically could be better. I'm not saying they are. I'm not ready to say that yet, but there's a path where they could. I still think that the loss of Diggs, loss of that alpha is going to be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and like it's weird to try and say like, oh well, they could be better, but like it's hard to even figure out what that compares to, because like during that stretch early on in the season, like those first 8 weeks or so when Ken Dorsey was still the offensive coordinator, they were still really high in a lot of like metrics, right? They were still high in EPA. They were kind of the team that, like, I don't want to say exposed EPA, because that's not really what happened, but the EPA stands for expected points added, and they were high in expected points added. They just never added the freaking points. Like, they would turn the ball over. They would find, they would miss in the red zone. All sorts of weird things would happen. Once Ken Dorsey went out, they were more consistent offensively. I wouldn't say they were like amazing most of the time, but they were certainly more consistent. And part of that is also because they were able to run the ball more. They were more consistent in running the ball more. Ken Dorsey was able to kind of fix the run game in a sense, where Daboll had a bunch of different concepts that he liked and never really narrowed down like one sort of like thing to really hone in on and master for the offensive line to work on and for his running backs to work on. Ken Dorsey was able to do that more while still adding other concepts. And I think having somebody like Aaron Kromer on staff helped him kind of realize those concepts and advance those concepts faster than maybe even the passing game, right? But the abilities of the offensive line also helped, right? Again, Aaron Kromer. And James Cook taking another clear step forward also helped. So all that put together meant that the run game got better, but Ken Dorsey just like never committed to the run game. I always go back to that Dallas game where obviously they ran the ball to smithereens against a defense that was incapable of stopping the run.
Wouldn't stop. Yeah.
Which just wouldn't stop. But that's something that Dorsey would never do, because Dorsey would be too stringent with what they had initially planned on doing, that he wouldn't just go see the game happening in front of him. He would, I mean, literally talk about missing the forest for the trees. That's like if you're gonna like criticize Ken Dorsey for in a broad stroke, that would be the way to do it. It's just like he knows what he's doing. He just doesn't know when to apply it all the time. And Brady knew how to adjust to that when it happened, right? Like once he saw that they were just not going to stop the run, he was just like, well, if they're not going to stop it, I'm not going to stop calling it. I will find a different way to run the ball. I'll run it left, I'll run it right, I'll run it up the middle, I'll do a toss, I'll do this, I'll do that. I'll do everything I need to. I will pull out every single run play we have to if we need to. But why stop at this point? Just because we had planned for something different. That doesn't make any sense. So I do appreciate the fact that Brady, I think, is capable of seeing the flow of a game and adjusting what he wants to do to that flow.
Yeah, and I think having Brady for this entire year is also going to be a benefit, and that gets to a point that I think is lost on a lot of the national analysts' view of the Bills. Is they look at the Bills and what they lost, and they don't look at the Bills and what they gained. And when I look at the gains, I think of things like this: Rasul Douglas for a full season,
right?
Joe Brady for a full season. A healthy Matt Milano, a healthy Terrell Bernard. If you go back to that final game where they were against the Kansas City Chiefs, where they lost by the skin of their teeth, right? Tyler Bass makes that field goal. Maybe something wacky happens. The Bills get the ball and they go to the AFC Championship game against the Ravens. I literally forgot this until last week. Somebody tweeted this. Christian Benford didn't play. He was hurt. Yeah. I completely forgot about that. I remember the linebackers, but I didn't remember. I did remember Rasul Douglas played less than 100%.
Yes.
And so did Tyrell Dodson, and so did Daquan Jones, and then Linval Joseph had to step in, and then Tim Settle had to step in, and all these things happened where I think a lot of people are looking at that and they're like, oh, the Bills' defense couldn't stop the Chiefs that game, and now they got worse because they lost Jordan Poyer, and they lost Micah Hyde, and they lost Trey White, and it's like, oh, wait, hold the phone here.
Right.
They lost all those pieces, and they were great for the Bills while they were here. But I look at the additions of a healthy Rasul Douglas and all those other names I just said, along with the draft picks. There's a chance that Cole Bishop in his rookie season could be, and this is going to sound crazy, he could be better than the latest version we saw of Jordan Poyer. I'm not – that's a complete shot in the dark, right? It could be 50-50, go either way. But the Jordan Poyer we saw in 2024 or 3 was not the Jordan Poyer we saw in 2022 and 2021 and 2020. So the Bills could possibly be more talented on the defensive side of the ball, especially if Von Miller rounds back into form. So when we talk about best case scenarios, right, we talked about the offense. There's a path where they could be as good as they were with Stephon Diggs. There's a path where they could be better holistically throughout the whole season because of their offensive coordinator being there the whole entire season. On the defensive side of the ball, I look at it the same way. They could be better. So best case scenario, and this is one thing that irks me with Bills fans. The best case scenario for the Bills every single year that Josh Allen's behind center is the Super Bowl. That's the best case. And it's no different this year. Regardless of what you think about the talent they lost, it has to be a Super Bowl. Like, that's the best case because he's that good. When it gets to the playoffs, he can single-handedly carry them if everything falls his way. You know, I wish somebody else would step up in the playoffs. That is probably the difference. But yeah, best case scenario for me, Bills Super Bowl. It has to be.
And you know, you bring up the Chiefs, right? And everybody brings up the Chiefs. Well, they can't beat the Chiefs. They have to beat the Chiefs. They can't do this against the Chiefs, blah, 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 blah. I look to the Chiefs as a reason to be hopeful, right? Like, the Chiefs were not supposed to win a Super Bowl last year. They had every reason to not win a Super Bowl last year, other than the fact that they had an elite top-tier defense in the regular season, which did not happen most of the time. There were times in years past where, you know, Steve Spagnuolo was able to dial up good game plans in the playoffs, and that would work out for them most of the time. But for the most part, that defense was a sieve in the regular season. This past year, they got this great defense that carried them, literally, like, dragged them, essentially, into not just the playoffs, but also a division. A division, by the way, which is a lot weaker than what the Bills face, right? Like, again, this Chiefs team lost to Aiden O'Connell and the Raiders on Christmas Day with the eyes of the world watching them at home in Kansas City. Like, they were that close to just, like, absolutely embarrassing themselves completely after that. They still managed to come back. One, because the defense was the one consistent part of their team all year. Mm-hmm. And then they also just had Patrick Mahomes. And in that same vein, the Bills still have Josh Allen. They have a Pro Bowl running back, which is a very fun thing to be able to say.
Yeah.
They have a Pro Bowl running back that they can lean on to not make it all about Josh Allen. They have an offensive line that is cohesive and coached up by one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL in the past, like, 20 years. And they have a defense that's led by one of the better defensive minds in the NFL in Sean McDermott. Mm-hmm. So there is reason to be hopeful. There's also reason to sit there and say, there are other teams in this division that are tough, that are pushing and pushing and pushing, and they're going to continue to push. They might falter. And if this is a year where maybe they take a step back and maybe they don't win the division and maybe they're a wild card team or maybe they just don't make the playoffs, that's certainly possible.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Worst case scenario would be not making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Would it also be, like, third in the division and, like, the Jets win the division and the Dolphins are a wild card?
Yeah, I would be comfortable saying that that's the worst case scenario, and there'd be a lot of question marks that come with that. I think third in the division is possible, and missing the playoffs is possible. I don't think it'll happen, but when we're talking worst case scenario, the thing that really, really, truly would be the worst case scenario is if Josh Allen significantly regresses this year because he doesn't have that alpha wide receiver one. If we see that happen, and then the Bills also falter and fall back out of the playoffs, then there's a lot of questions. There is no question that Josh Allen is the Bills franchise quarterback, but he might need more help than we truly think he needs. And if that's the case, then you go into next season having to go out and get a wide receiver one, not draft one, go get one because you know you need that for him. That, to me, would be the worst case scenario. That, along with this defense where you lose Hyde and you lose Poyer and you lose that experience and that talent in the back end, maybe that experience masked a lot of inefficiencies and all of a sudden the defense completely collapses. And then we're left questioning Sean McDermott's tenure with Buffalo. But so there's a lot that could go wrong this year. I think third in the division, not making the playoffs, that is legitimately the worst case scenario.
I would agree. I cannot imagine a scenario, realistically, given what we know right now, where the Bills are worse than the Patriots, because I think the Patriots are the worst team in the division. Yeah. And we'll get to the Patriots, and I'm relatively hopeful about their future. 2024 is not going to be their year, and that's fine. That's fine for them. That's totally fine for them if you're a Patriots fan. All right, that was a long time to talk. Let's look at comments here. What do we got?
Just to lay out one caveat quick too. When we say this, when we're talking about this, and I know that you feel this way too, we're not talking about Josh Allen has a career-ending injury. Like, that's just crazy. And we're also assuming relative health for the team. Like, if Josh Allen gets hurt week one, throw everything in the trash. Everything's different. So when we talk about worst-case scenario, it's things going south that aren't absolutely catastrophic, like this
things that are within their control, essentially, like assuming things they're relatively healthy and things of that nature. We're not talking about that. We're talking about looking at the roster, comparing that to what else is in the division and how that can all play out. Let's see. First of all, Drew Castiglia, thank you for the advice. Smash that like button, everyone. If you're in here right now, hit the like button. It helps us, it supports us, And we appreciate all of you for being here and supporting us and joining us every Monday night, especially during the off season, and just hearing us jibber jabber about whatever we feel like talking about. Let's see. Justin Shorter, MVP. Justin Shorter is on the team. That is a factual thing. Vladimir says Knox, when healthy, is the best number 2 tight end in the NFL.
I have to think about. I can't think of the two. I mean, it might be Michael Mayer on the Raiders right now. But
You could make a case for like that duo in Las Vegas with the Raiders, Michael Mayer and Brock Bowers.
Yeah.
There we go. Could not think of that. Man, now I'm trying to think. They're not there yet. There's potential where the Green Bay Packers with Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft could be like the best like 1-2 punch, and Tucker Kraft is just like devastating as a blocker. So there's that.
Isaiah Likely.
Oh yeah, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely.
That's
it. Isaiah Likely could be like a number of teams starting tight end right now. Oh man. I have both on one of my dynasty teams. I'm trying to offload at least one. See if Mark Andrews can get me anything. Let's see. Nobody wants to hear about that. Let's see. Walter S says it's like people forget we almost lost to the Chiefs in the regular season. I didn't hear anyone discount our win despite them missing Pacheco. Sure. I mean, yeah, that too. Let's see. Just typical news says the only way they don't make the playoffs is because they go something like 8-9 or 9-8. I think the trials and tribulations they went through this past season, along with being healthy, is helpful. Yeah, I mean, it was hard. It's a hard thing to come back from 6-6 in the middle of your season, go into your bye week, and then win every game in the regular season after that. It's a hard thing to do, and especially given the injuries that they had, right? Like, people are very hopeful in some ways, I think, because of that stretch they had at the end of the season. And if you are hopeful because of that, then you should be even more hopeful because they had so many injuries that you should be able to look at the start of the season and be like, well, they're healthier, if nothing else. And that in itself can be a big deal in how consistent this team can be. Let's see. The RJ says this Bills team could miss the playoffs and play well this year. The schedule is the most brutal in the league. Part of me wishes we lost the Miami game in 17 and had a second place schedule.
Buddy.
That's so
RJ buddy.
Doomery.
You gotta calm down, my man. He's gotta calm down.
You gotta,
I love him. I love RJ.
RJ, God bless you. You are here every week. We understand. We love your support every week. We really do. It's why every time you comment or every week you're here, there's some comment I put up here. You're here every week. I love you, buddy. Step away from the cliff. There's no reason to be that close to the edge. Just like that's not the focus you should be having with this team right now. It is what it is.
I love. We don't have a Super Bowl. I know that's the ultimate goal, right?
Right.
We got 4 straight division titles. I love saying that. I love that you got to say that earlier on this show and talk about how like. If I went back 20 years, the version of me that watched the Bills then thinking about winning 4 straight division titles, that was insane. That was never going to happen in my lifetime. That they have, that is a successful thing. Unless you truly believe the only success you can have in the NFL is winning a Super Bowl, which seems like a miserable existence, honestly. Like that would drive me insane if that's the way that I thought. Enjoy the positive moments like winning a division title. Don't wish that we didn't win it. I love RJ.
Enjoy having fun.
Yeah.
Like that's the only thing I can really say, right? Like I understand there are frustrations. I understand that there are things you wish broke a different way for this team. I am right there with you. I get it. But you can't just sit here and be bitter about just that. You have to look at these seasons and have fun when the wins come and when the fun times actually happen. That's just part of it. That week 4 win against Miami is some of the most fun I've had as a Bills fan. That week 18 game against Miami was just like, it was great. It was awesome. It was fun. Enjoy those moments. That's part of this whole game. It's a game. Yeah, have fun with it. That's all I would say. Just have fun with your team being good, even if they're not doing the exact thing that you want them to do, even if they're not achieving the ultimate goal all the time. Yeah. Have fun with it. It's just part, because at some point the wheels will fall off. I don't know when that's going to be, but time moves ever forward, and we do not have access to the quantum realm. So at some point, this team's going to be bad again. I don't know when, but it's going to happen. Yeah, and when that happens, you're going to look back at this time and be like, man, 4 straight AFC East championships. How great was that? It is, and I understand the frustrations. I do. Yeah. I understand. Let's see. Just typical news. Good news: if we don't make the playoffs, we won't have to trade up too high for a wide receiver. Oh, always on the positive side, guys. Walter S says, I just feel like in a league where every team is trying to surround their quarterback with the best possible talent, that we're, by comparison, are doing the opposite, and we're saying our guy's good enough. I wouldn't say that. I would say that they didn't feel comfortable paying Gabe Davis the amount of money that he got, which is fair. I think that that's fair. And they also didn't want to get rid of Stephon Diggs. They got rid of Stephon Diggs because he just didn't fit with the team anymore. He became more trouble than he was worth. So I wouldn't say that they're looking at this saying, it's good enough, it's fine, don't worry about it. If they really felt that way, they wouldn't have spent money on Curtis Samuel. They wouldn't have drafted Dalton Kincaid last year. They wouldn't have gone and gotten Keon Coleman with their first pick in this draft. So I don't think that that's really their mentality. I think that they just had choices to make and had to make tough choices with that. And they made the tough choices to say, we're not going to bring back Gabe Davis, even though Josh Allen likes him and has a good rapport with him, and he does good things for our offense. And we're not going to deal with Stephon Diggs' attitude anymore, because we can move on from this and get out of this, and we'll get something out of it at the end of the day. We'll get a second-round pick, which could be undervalued. It might be overvalued. I don't know. The Texans at this point are kind of trading a second-round pick for a one-year rental, and maybe that pays off for them, and maybe they sign Diggs to an extension. I don't know, but it doesn't look like the most even thing for them either. So it's tough to say.
And there's two ends of the spectrum here, right? You talked about the Texans, like they seem to be trading everything for all this talent to put around CJ Stroud, and that's great. That might work out for them. There's also the Chiefs this past year. Like I think we can't rewrite history. The Chiefs didn't have any talent at wide receiver last year. They had arguably less talent at wide receiver last year than the Bills do going into this year, if not the same, similar. So this idea that every other team's doing it is wrong. Look at the Bengals. They let Tyler Boyd walk. Yeah. They replaced him with Jermaine Burton, who's a rookie who might be good, but they aren't doing it. Justin Herbert literally. He has nothing. So,
Vlad McConkey for 150 targets. Yeah. Slam the over on that. I don't know what the over-under is for Vlad McConkey targets. Hit the over on that. There is no one else for that poor bastard to throw to, man.
For the most part, you're proven elite quarterbacks. Talking about Josh Allen, talking about Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, those guys, the teams aren't spending a ton of money to surround them with talent. They're saying, our guy's good enough. He'll elevate everyone around them. The other quarterbacks that are less proven, like a CJ Stroud, they're saying we need all the talent possible to make sure that he can excel. So I don't think that it's just the Bills saying, our guy's good enough, but also at the same time, they are kind of like, dude, our guy's good enough because he is good enough.
Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and that's enough to win a lot of football games. Joe DeRosa from Under Review says there's a visible floor for the Bills that didn't exist the past 3 seasons. It feels like they have a low that they can hit, but also expectations they could easily exceed. And I think that that's true. This will really fall on how Josh meshed with Brady's full playbook and new skill position options, and whether the changes on defense don't bite the team too harshly in a transitional year. I think that's all fair. It's all very fair to say. RJ says, I know, you guys are good. No, I just wish we had an easy schedule. I mean, I thought us purposely losing games would help this year as a cheat code, just trying to find out how to break the system. Listen, if I could figure out how best to, like, if I could, like, get into the NFL's, like, schedule making system, if I could, like, hack into AWS, Amazon is who makes their schedule, right? Or they use Amazon's services for that. I feel like I've seen.
They probably say they do, but it's probably like, hey, say you do that. I mean, who knows? They probably do it too.
Did you know that there was like for a very long time, the MLB schedule was made by one couple, like just this random couple that would go through all these different like notepads and write out schedules and try and figure out, well, this guy is planning on retiring by the end of the year, so we'll have him at home. But that means that series has to, for a long time, that's how the MLB made their schedule, was relying on this older couple to make their schedules before they went with actual whatever computers and numbers and stuff. We're losing recipes, Uber. Adam Lulov says Ray Davis is going to be a stud in this offense. Ray Davis has the potential to be a really good, like, option for this offense. Like when he got drafted, and we were on here with Max. Yes, thank you. The first thing I asked him was like, all right, I don't know enough about this guy. Is this somebody like that will complement Cooking? He was like, yes, absolutely. This is the guy. And when you watch him, he absolutely is. This is somebody that I'm pretty confident in. And not to go back to fantasy football, but as someone who's a James Cook owner in some leagues, I'm taking Ray Davis at some point in those drafts if I can. So he's going to get touchdowns. He's going to get short yardage carries. And in some games, he's just going to get not more carries, I think, than James Cook. I don't think that's ever going to be the case. But I think that there's an opportunity for him to get more carries than people are probably expecting him to get.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Are we good? Are we good on the Bills? Anything else you want to say?
No. I mean, I think we hit on a lot of things, and I think that the floor and ceiling are there. I think that they'll be closer to the ceiling than the floor.
Terrell Bernard, 2024 All-Pro. We're speaking truth to power. We're doing it.
Are you joining the Terrell Bernard hive?
Oh, listen, I'm here now. I was here last year after like week 3, and I was okay, this guy's good. Like I'm all for it. But now I'm just like bitter that he didn't even get like a Pro Bowl nod or anything even close to that. And I'm just like, we're just gonna do it. And even after the season he had, nobody talks about Terrell Bernard. None of these national guys know him. Nobody knows who he is.
Dude, there's people tweeting out like, "Oh, dude, the Bills lost their starting linebacker Tyrell Dodson. Like, who's Matt Milano going to play next to?" It's like, "Oh, you sons of."
It's just like, come on, guys. All right, we're gonna move on. Where do you want to go next?
You want to get the Patriots out of the way?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay.
Okay. So, the New England Patriots. They're not gonna be a good team. Let's just start there. They're not gonna be a good team. I do think that there's potential for them to be a competitive team, where even if they don't win a lot of games, I think that they will give teams trouble. I think they have the ability to work against a lot of teams. That being said, you have a rookie head coach who's pretty young, right? Like this is not a guy who like was a coordinator for a long time or anything like that. It's somebody who's young, who, obviously the ownership in New England was very impressed by and developed an entire like succession plan for when Belichick leaves. It's like, we know your kid's on the coaching staff, but we're not that interested, and we're not really interested in other players or coaches as well. We just really like Gerard Mayo. Like it's very, very interesting. So you have a rookie head coach. You also have a rookie quarterback. And usually that particular combination does not yield like immediate, strong winning results. That's fine. That's totally fine. Like you don't need to be competing for this division in year one of the Gerard Mayo, Drake May, Elliott Wolf experiment. You just need to be able to show that there is a plan in place and that there's room for growth and that you can actually achieve that growth. Because what they have right now is interesting. Drake May, I liked more than Jaden Daniels. And I liked Jaden Daniels. I think that he was a perfectly fine quarterback who should not have been taken second overall in pretty much any draft. I mean, there's some bad quarterback drafts, but regardless, Drake May was somebody who was certainly more talented, certainly from an arm talent perspective. And you pair him and get not just one, but two rookie wide receivers who I always like giving rookie quarterbacks a wide receiver that they could come up with and then adding a second guy. And both of these guys are guys that people like. Jalen Polk and Javon Baker. Like, both of these guys are guys that people really liked. Obviously, this is a deep wide receiver class. It made sense to double down for them, especially at a spot where they had basically no one other than, like, Pop Douglas and, if you were really being optimistic, Kendrick Bourne coming off of a torn ACL or whatever he has. Yeah, they do have KJ Osborne, who's been good for Minnesota the last couple of years. And if you really squint hard enough, you can make a case for Juju Smith-Schuster. But those are all just sort of like role players who succeed by having better guys in front of them. Whether or not Javon Baker and Jalen Polk are those guys is yet to be determined. Maybe one breaks out and the other doesn't. Maybe neither works out. Maybe they both work. Who knows? But there's a plan in place. There's ideas here, especially offensively, that they have not had since Brady left, essentially. Like, they went through that first year with Cam where they were 7-9 and they could run the ball well, but they really couldn't throw all that effectively. They get Mac Jones in 2021. He has a solid rookie season that made you feel like, okay, this is somebody that can work, and as long as the defense with Belichick can stay good and stay consistent, then they can still be a competitive team in this division. But then Josh McDaniels left, and Bill Belichick's replacement plan was Matt Patricia and Joe Judge and Bill O'Brien. And shocker, none of those guys really worked out all that well. And like, Bill O'Brien brought some semblance of intelligence last year, but not that much. And really only felt intelligent in comparison to Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. Right? Like, putting a guy like Mac Jones in a position to not succeed will never make sense to me. It just deliberately diluting the talent on your offense and especially your coaching staff for no reason other than, I guess, ego never makes sense to me. But it's what happened, and they can't do anything about it now. What they can do is hire an actual offensive coordinator, which they did in Alex Van Pelt, who has worked with young quarterbacks like Baker Mayfield. He's worked with Deshaun Watson last year. He helped, like, revitalize the corpse of Joe Flacco at the end of the Browns run last year. So there's something there. And really, one of the best parts about this for the Patriots, if they really don't want to play Drake May right away, they don't have to, because they have Jacoby Brissett, who again has also worked with Alex Van Pelt when they were both in Cleveland. And even beyond that, Jacoby Brissett is just a great guy to have in your quarterback room. He is somebody that will show Drake May how to do the right things the right way. And that's such an important thing. That was something that the Bills did not do effectively to start Josh Allen's career. When they looked at that quarterback room, they had Josh Allen that they drafted, and then they said, we'll have Nate Peterman, and that's good enough. And it so obviously was not. And then they had to sign Derek Anderson in the middle of the season just to be like, we need some sort of, like, feasible quarterback play. Yeah. Like, something that's going to work here when Josh Allen's elbow is hurt. Anyway.
And Derek Anderson at that time was, like, the perfect dude to bring in, I feel like, for Josh Allen. An old seasoned vet that's been through trials and tribulations of really bad teams and knows what it means to be a professional quarterback and was able to teach him. And I think the Patriots have, like you said, something similar with Jacoby Brissett being there to teach Drake May. I do think at some point, like, this can't be a redshirt season for Drake May. I don't really even particularly believe in redshirt seasons, even though I know Patrick Mahomes had his, and Aaron Rodgers had his, and Tom Brady, in a sense, had all of his. And so some of the greatest quarterbacks of all time had a quote-unquote redshirt season. But I think you throw him into the fire at some point and see what happens, but you don't have to do it right away if he's legitimately not ready. The best-case scenario for the Patriots, though, I don't think it's a playoff appearance. I don't think it's 9-8. Probably you're looking 8-9, 7-10, 6-11, whatever those numbers, you can get to that area. But what the best case scenario is that Drake May flashes. That Drake May doesn't look like Bryce Young. That Drake May looks closer to C.J. Stroud. And I will say, he's not going to look like C.J. Stroud. No. Like the season C.J. Stroud had as a rookie, the season that Justin Herbert had as a rookie, the season Baker Mayfield had as a rookie. Even though I just said 3 players that have been in the NFL for over the past 6-7 years, it's rare that you are so successful as a rookie. I wouldn't expect Drake May to just suddenly be like, oh my God, a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback. But that's the best case scenario, is that he gets close to that. And you see those flashes and you get excited, and then you go into the draft next year and you get him some real weapons. Because, like you said, Pop Douglas, fun piece, Kendrick Bourne, what is he? Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, like we'll see what they are as players. There's not a lot of proven talent at wide receiver.
Yeah.
We talked about tight ends. I actually forgot about this. Hunter Henry's a great tight end, and Austin Hooper is their TE2. And Austin Hooper is a good tight end too to have. So they have some pieces on the offensive side of the ball where they can, like you said, compete. I don't think that this is a team that's challenging for a division title or a playoff appearance for that matter.
Yeah, and the offensive line is still pretty solid. Yeah, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, Okorafor, Cole Strange. There's hope around CD Sow. But again, this is just an offense that's going to take some time to fully realize what they have. And just because I like certain pieces and I like the future of this team does not mean that I think that they're going to be ready to go in 2024. And all of this, I mean, we've been talking about the offense in particular. This is all assuming that the defense is still performing at a high level, right? And I think that's possible because I think Gerard Mayo got this job for an actual reason. And I think that he can be somebody that can transition this defense into something a bit more modern while still doing like all the great sort of Belichick type of stuff. I mean, if they were really going to change things from what Belichick was doing defensively, they would not have the current roster that they have, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is you look at this lineup on defense: Keon White, Devon Gottschall, Christian Barmore, Matthew Judon, Jelani Tavai, Kyle Duggar, Jabril Peppers. Like, this is such a Belichick type of defense, right? Like, this is such a Belichick type defense. And I think they're going to continue to build in that sort of mold. And with a healthy Christian Gonzalez, I think that's going to help them a lot.
Kid is so good.
He's very, very good. And it's irritating thinking about the fact that he fell to them in that draft. Yeah. But this is... There's potential for this defense to be good, obviously, because they've been good the last couple of years. There's also potential where, like, maybe Gerard Mayo struggles with balancing how to work this defense in with his head coaching duties, and it just takes time for that to kind of mesh as well. This is such a fascinating team to me to watch now, and this might be one of those teams that I really kind of track more closely throughout the years throughout this year than other teams, because I'm really interested in seeing what this team is going to look like without Belichick at the helm. Because it already looks different. I mean, the extensions that they gave out this offseason are not things that they would have done with Belichick in charge. Elliot Wolf took control and said, this is how we're going to do things now. All respect to Bill Belichick and all that he did, this is how we're going to do things now. So I think that there is positivity in the fact that they're not trying to replicate, like a lot of Belichick disciples have done, what Bill Belichick has done. They're trying to do their own thing.
Yeah, and I do think that this team's going to be different in perception than last year's team. So there was a point last year with that Patriots team where it got so dire that like watching them play was just really bad, man. Like they were a really, really bad foot. They legitimately could not compete, and they weren't going to sneak up on anybody because they were just bad. And lo and behold, they still beat the Bills.
Yeah.
But we always get one of those a year, I guess. So, but this year, I think that I have a little bit more confidence in them to sneak up on a team or two and make like a splash win here and there because of the defense, really. Like, I think Christian Gonzalez, Kyle Duggar, Christian Barmore, Matthew Judon, like that foursome right there alone, they could win a game. Like, they could go play, and not saying they'll I actually don't even know if they're playing the Chiefs, but if they played a team like the Chiefs, and I'm not saying they'd beat the Chiefs, I could see those guys making a couple splash plays and pulling an Aiden O'Connell Raiders against the Chiefs. Like they have the ability to do that. But to your point, how is this defense going to change with Gerard Mayo as opposed to Bill Belichick? Because Bill Belichick is legitimately one of the greatest defensive minds that football has ever seen. You don't just suddenly take that like education level and that talent and that mind out of your room and don't lose something. Like something's going to be missing this year. And I think what you kind of said with the head coaching and defensive, like balancing that, there's going to be a game he's playing a team like the Bills where the Bills expose something early and he can't adjust. He just doesn't have the ability as a young head coach, and that team just beats the living snot out of him. So if I'm playing the Patriots, which the Bills will be playing them twice, give me them early in the year. Let me get them when they're going through those kind of growing pains and just get a quick, easy W out of them. I'd rather have them early than late for them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, honestly. If when the schedule releases on Wednesday, if I see New England Patriots week 1, I'm all for that.
Yeah,
let me tell you something. They're never going to do that. They're going to want the Dolphins or the Jets week 1. They're going to want to put the Jets in week 1 because that's what they did last year. They didn't get the game that they wanted. They still got a great game. In fairness, they still got a great game out of that. If you weren't a Bills fan, but like that they really wanted Aaron Rodgers in the spotlight, and they're gonna do it again. So it is what it is. All right, I think it's an. Are you good on the Patriots?
I'll just throw out there the worst case scenario. Like I said, the best case is Drake May looks great. The worst case is he's a complete utter disaster, and there's just no reclaim. Like he's Bryce Young, but worse. And if that's the case, then not only do you not have your quarterback, and then let's say also like the coaching changes don't work, you just have to start all over again, and it's going to be an issue.
Yeah, it would be tough. It would be very, very tough. All right, Dolphins or Jets? Where do you want to go?
Let's do the Jets because the Dolphins have me all pissed off this past week.
As opposed to other days. All right, so New York Jets. We're gonna, like we did with the Bills, we're gonna start with the caveat. If they stay healthy, and we're gonna get that out of the way now, because I feel like I could say that about a lot of different parts of this team, if they stay healthy, right? So we're just gonna get that out of the way now. We're talking about assuming this team stays healthy. This is probably the best Jets roster that's been assembled since the Rex Ryan days, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe better.
It probably is better because at the end of the day, like the best of Mark Sanchez is probably still not as good as 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers coming off of an Achilles tear.
Yeah.
Which I understand that's insulting to say, but also it's not. Like that's just reality. And also like Mark Sanchez. I don't know if you ever listened to him call an NFL game. I don't know if you knew that Mark Sanchez was an NFL color announcer.
He did college. He does college too. Doesn't he do college?
I don't think he does college. I think he does the NFL. He would be better in college, actually, now that you mention it, because he says the weirdest things a person can possibly say in the middle of a game. It is the most random stuff. I'm sure someone on YouTube has put together like weird Mark Sanchez things that he said during a game. Anyway, you look at where they are, particularly on offense, right? Because that's what people care about. We know this defense is good, and I'm going to stop trying to predict that this defense is not going to be good this year, because Robert Saleh and their defensive coordinator Jeff Elbridge just get these guys to play so well every year that they've been there. I'm going to stop they don't rely on turnovers, so you can't say like, oh, well, they're going to be, they got so many turnovers last year, they're going to get, they're going to have a bunch of turnovers this year. They don't rely on turnovers, so I can't predict that sort of variance. Their defensive line took some losses. They also brought in some other guys, right? Like Javon Kinlaw. Maybe you could say that defensive tackle is a potential issue, right? You still have Quentin Williams, who is elite defensive player. Outside of that, you have Javon Kinlaw, who hasn't really proven much in the NFL. You have Solomon Thomas, who, again, hasn't proven much in the NFL. Both of those guys are former San Francisco guys from when Saleh was there. Leki Fotu was somebody that some people liked when he came out a couple years ago from Utah, but hasn't really done much in the NFL. But at defensive end, you've got Michael Clemens, who a lot of people really like. Jermaine Johnson, who is a solid enough pass rusher. Hassan Reddick, who has had like 2 or 3 straight years of 10-plus sacks in the NFL, which is a hard thing to do. You still have Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley. C.J. Mosley seems to be the ageless wonder at linebacker. Sauce Gardner is still good. DJ Reed is one of the best second cornerbacks you can have in the NFL. Michael Carter is a great nickel that you can have. It's a good defense. They're well coached. They're talented. And that's what they're going to be this year. I have no doubt in my mind about that. So most of what we talk about is going to be this offense. Because this offense last year was doo-doo. It was bad. It was an actual rolling dumpster fire going down the streets of Manhattan or New Jersey. They play in New Jersey, so. I mean, it was so bad. And it felt like coming off of 2022... It really felt like, okay, 2023, whatever happens, they can't be worse than what they were in 2022. And I think they were about as bad, 2022 and 2023. They were about as bad as they were in both of those seasons. There was nothing discernible about how different they were. From a coaching perspective, they were certainly worse, right? Like, Nate Hackett is a clear downgrade from Mike LaFleur. And Mike LaFleur was made a scapegoat because Zach Wilson can't play football. And Nate Hackett gets brought in as part of the pitch to Rodgers, essentially, right? Like, hey, you can come to New York and we got your buddy here. We got your guy. You're the one who said he makes things fun, and it's so brutal. It's so brutal. And there was a report today from... who was it?
Connor Hughes?
Connor Hughes, that's it, yeah. Where he basically said, like, the Jets have tried multiple times this offseason to bring in someone else to not replace Nate Hackett, but basically to supersede him as, like, a play caller. And my guess is they would probably bring in this guy to be, like, quarterback's coach or passing game coordinator or something like that, right? And then just have Nate Hackett be the offensive coordinator and basically just be the vibes guy, which is what he seems to be good at. That's whenever somebody asks about Nate Hackett, they always say, great guy, tons of great energy, really positive guy. They never say anything about what he is as a coach because everyone would say, he's okay, I guess. And that would probably be generous, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
So you look at this. They bring in Tyron Smith from Dallas, who, when he's healthy, great left tackle.
Yeah.
Might not, but in the same sense that Teron Armstead for Miami is a great tackle when he's healthy, you just know there's going to be games that he's going to miss. Elijah Vera Tucker, great guard, has missed games in several years. Morgan Moses, same sort of deal. Pretty solid tackle, but hasn't always been healthy. They have guys. They have guys. Garrett Wilson on offense at wide receiver alone is like is just waiting. You could feel it. They're just waiting for this guy to have the season that they know he can have. They know this guy can do it. But it hasn't happened yet because he's just been surrounded by such utter nonsense. And I think that season will happen this year. I really do. And it's unfortunate because I don't want a guy named Garrett should not be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I'm sorry. If you're going to be one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, your name should not be Garrett. He needs to change his name. You can wear number 5. You can play for the Jets. You can do all this sort of stuff. Change your name. You cannot be named Garrett. It does not make sense to me. It does not compute in my mind. You sign Mike Williams, who, again, like we've said, if healthy, could be a really good complement to what Garrett Wilson does. But I can't think of a year that dude has ever been healthy. I'm sure there's been a year, and I'm just like overlooking that. But that dude does not stay healthy. And even when he does stay healthy, he is truly a one-trick pony. He's very good at that one trick, but he is a one-trick pony. The guys behind him, Xavier Gibson, Alan Lazard, Jason Brownlee, like Malachi Corley, who they took in the 3rd round this year. Like, okay, there's nothing here that excites me. Like, Alan Lazard did nothing last year when he had opportunities. Xavier Gibson is a good depth guy and a good return guy. That's about all he is. Malachi Corley is a rookie and a very raw rookie at that because he's transitioning from running back to wide receiver. You better hope that Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams stay healthy, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think, like, we keep throwing the caveat out about the health thing, and we brought it up with the Bills, but I think it's realistic with the Jets to talk about health as an issue because it's been an issue for these players for a long time. The reason we don't talk about worst case scenario for the Bills with Josh Allen getting injured or somebody else, like, you could bring up Matt Milano and say, yeah, he could get hurt again because who knows what he's going to be at 30 with his injury history now kind of starting to build up. You can use that on him, but other players on that team, not so much. On this team, though, like you laid out, like Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses and Elijah Vera Tucker and Mike Williams, like, there's so much injury history there that it's a proven track record of injury. And you also brought this up when the Dolphins signed Teron Armstead. It was a cool signing, like, great player. You got a really, really, really good football player, but he's going to miss games. Like, he's going to miss games. Tyron Smith is going to miss games. So when they miss those games, who is the team that they're playing and how many games does he miss is going to be paramount to this team. And on top of that, the Aaron Rodgers thing, I think, is the biggest discussion point on this Jets is he's 41 years old or 40 years old, whatever age he is. He's at an extreme age for quarterbacks where essentially one quarterback in NFL history has worked out in Tom Brady. And he's coming off an Achilles injury. He's coming off, prior to that, the worst season he's ever played. And now what are we to expect from him? I expect better than Zach Wilson, but I think too many Jets fans are leaning into the 2020 Aaron Rodgers and the 2021 Aaron Rodgers, the back-to-back MVP. That's not what he is. Like, he's not – Aaron Rodgers will not win the MVP this year. And I hope that the worst-case scenario for me is that he does and a Jets fan finds this clip, and then I just have to never, ever, ever record myself saying anything again. But, no, it comes down to Aaron Rodgers. 1, can he stay healthy? 2, can he play well enough to compete with the likes of Josh Allen? I like their backup quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. Bills fans obviously intimately aware of him. I think he's better than Zach Wilson, so that alone's an upgrade. But Aaron Rodgers, in order for that team to compete for the division title, needs to play well above what Tyrod Taylor is capable of playing for. And if this team's going to go compete for a Super Bowl, which I think – if they're completely healthy all year, the Jets can compete for a Super. Like, this team is stacked. Yeah. Like, they are absolutely stacked. The only real weakness when healthy would be safety. Like, I don't know what Chuck Clark is going to be. Tony Adams is fine. And I'm interested to see how Sauce Gardner and DJ Reed play without any real help behind them, depending on what those two guys are. But this team, like, if you're a rational Bills fan, and this was what that tweet was originally about, and you're looking at this team, my God, man, like, this team's really, really good.
Yeah. And so when we talk about worst case scenario is Nate Hackett is literally too big of an obstacle for them to overcome.
Yes.
As BK says here, as long as Hackett is the OC, I'm not afraid of the Jets offense.
Good point.
That's fair. We've all seen firsthand what Nate Hackett can and cannot do.
Yeah.
And it's brutal. But the other part of this is like maybe that's something they can't overcome. Maybe this is the year the defense just doesn't perform at an elite level. I doubt it. I don't think that's actually going to happen. But if those things don't work out, you're probably looking at what? 7, 8, 9 wins, maybe 9 wins, maybe. Best case scenario, they win this division and go on a deep playoff run. And maybe they make the Super Bowl and win it. It's possible. It's certainly within the realm of possibility that it's very weird to say. I literally had to like stop myself and think about it. It's very possible within the realm that we live in, the reality that we live in, that the New York Jets could be Super Bowl champions in 2024.
You almost couldn't say it right
I'm struggling with this, man. It's a weird thing to try and like articulate. It really is, but it's possible. It really is, and I think there's also a very distinct possibility, right, where neither the best case scenario or the worst case scenario that we've laid out actually happens for them. Maybe they're a wild card team, and if they are a wild card team, they can still go on a run and go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
This is the team that's capable of being like the 7th seed and making a run.
Getting healthy at the right time, too.
Right.
Yep.
That could be a very realistic possibility, at least in my mind, where they could just do just enough to get that playoff berth, which, by the way, they currently have. I think they're the longest drought. They have not been to the playoffs for the longest time, right? Like they're the longest drought in the
by
NFL.
a lot.
Yeah, like the Dolphins have not won a playoff. This is the fun part, right? About talking about these two teams. The Dolphins have been to the playoffs many times. That the Jets have not been to the playoffs, but the Jets have a more recent playoff win than the Dolphins do, which is, it almost feels impossible to say something like that, but it's also true. I also saw a hilarious statistic. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I know where you're going. Yep.
Okay. So, fun time for those who enjoy trivia. Since 1970, there have been 5 teams in the AFC East. There's been the Bills, the Jets, the Patriots, the Dolphins, and the Colts, who are also a part of the AFC East. The Colts have more AFC East championships than the Jets, and the Colts have not been in the AFC East for at least 25 years, if not longer.
Yeah.
That is astounding to me.
It's glorious.
Absolutely astounding to me. It's just one of the craziest things. When I saw that, I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no. And of course it's true. Yeah. So at the end of the day, in my mind, I am willing to say the Jets are more likely to be a playoff team than not. I would say.
Yeah, I mean, when we lead up to the season, I'll probably tweet out something of like where I think teams will finish, and I won't pick the Steelers to win the AFC North, but that withhold, I'll pick the Jets to make the playoffs because I think they're legitimately a playoff team. But you brought up the droughts. I just have the real numbers: 13 seasons since the Jets have made the playoffs. The second longest is the Broncos at 8, which is kind of a weird number. But the Dolphins have the longest streak without a win in the playoffs at 23 years. The Raiders are second at 21. So, and also the Dolphins have the longest playoff loss streak at 6. The second longest is the Commanders and the Steelers at 5. So just some interesting little trends there. But yeah, this team, I already laid out my best case. They win the Super Bowl because I think they have the talent on paper to go and win a Super Bowl. My worst case scenario for them, and I've been trying to think how to say this, is they don't make the playoffs and then Aaron Rodgers refuses to retire. They're forced to play him next year, and he just sucks again. He'll play on $51.5 million cap hit next year, by the way. And then he will be off the roster in 2026, which is great, even though the Jets will still be paying him $35 million that season. So if they don't make the playoffs this year, the Jets literally have to enter a hard reset. They have to. Saleh has to be fired. Joe Douglas everyone has to be fired. And all this great young core they have of Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson, Quinnen Williams, Sauce Gardner, they have such great young talent. They're not going to want to play for the Jets. And so if they don't make the playoffs this year, that's not just worst case, that's disaster. Like the Jets having the longest playoff drought in the NFL, if they don't make the playoffs this year, I'd put money on it that they surpass the Bills' 17 seasons without the playoffs.
Yeah. Yeah. That's gonna be this is what happens when you go all in. You gotta commit to it, and they are committing to it, that's for sure. But it means that it's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough after this. If they don't win it this year, if they really do have like the worst case scenario this year and they don't make the playoffs, it's gonna be a long time until they get back to that point again.
I'll fire up the old AM radio and just try to pick up the feed from down in the city because I love listening to those Jets fans talk.
Oh man, yeah, time and a half. Let me tell you. All right, we're gonna move on from the Jets. We're gonna get to our last team, and that is the Miami Dolphins, the perennial runner-up in the AFC East. So, Dolphins, not quite in the same all-in mentality, but they're definitely feeling the pressure right now because they have had, I think, 4 straight seasons now with 2 different head coaches where they've won 10 games or more. Am I remembering this correctly?
I think you might have that right, yeah.
Because they went back-to-back 10-6 with Brian Flores, and then they fired him. And then Mike McDaniel has been
9-8 and 10-6, and then Mike McDaniel was 9-8, 11-6. So it's funny that that's pretty interesting. The same kind of records, though they made the playoffs twice with McDaniel.
Right. Yeah, and that's always the big thing with owners in particular. So with that, they've had a winning record for 4 straight seasons. Let's go with that. They've had a winning record for 4 straight seasons, which is good for them. That's a sign of a stable organization that has not always been so stable, right? Like this is, in some ways, it almost feels like the Broncos and the Dolphins have swapped places, where the Broncos used to be this like super consistent, strong, winning organization. It was a long time before they had back-to-back losing seasons in that organization, which is a weird thing to think about. But with the Dolphins, right, 4 straight winning seasons, 2 different head coaches, though. So you have Tua, you have Mike McDaniel, you've got Tyreek, you've got Jalen Waddle, you now have Odell Beckham, for whatever that's worth, at this point in his career. You have Teron Armstead, who we've talked about, as one of those guys where if he stays healthy, great player, or when he's healthy, great player. All that is well and good, but it's really hard for me to see this team being any different than what they've been in the last 4 seasons, essentially, where the results are any different. Like, they've had so much. People talk about the talent that left Buffalo. The talent that left the Dolphins on defense in particular is wild. And sure, you bring in a Jordan Brooks, okay. You draft Chop Robinson and Mohamed Kamara, okay. You brought in 2 undersized edge rushers to basically fill the gap until your 2 better edge rushers come back from injury. Fine. Like, this is not something that's really intimidating me as a Bills fan. It doesn't really... This is not moving the needle for me. This seems like the same Dolphins team, and they're just kind of hoping the next step does get taken. But who's taking that next step? Is Tua going to be much better than what he was last year? He led the league in passing yards. Is he going to be that much better this year for some reason that nobody can really explain why. Like, we're in year 4. Is this the 5th year of Tua, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. What exactly are we expecting to have change here?
Man, this is the thing. I have tried to be as respectful as I possibly can to Dolphins fans.
Why?
Because I see talent on the roster.
I do too.
You and I had a conversation last week where, not to rehash it, but I think Tua is better than a certain other Florida quarterback.
You do, which is wrong, but that's okay.
We won't go back into that. But Dolphins fans want to get all up in their feelings about every little slight that they get, even when the slight has factual evidence behind it. It blows my mind. That being said, this team reeks of desperation. It reeks of desperation. And the 2 defensive ends are the things that really key that to me. The 2 rookie defensive ends they drafted, which are smaller defensive ends that are very fast. Because there's a certain quarterback in the division that beats the living shit out of them every time they play, and they need somebody to go get them. But to your point, there are 2 other defensive ends, Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, who are – Jalen Phillips is borderline very, very good if he can just stay healthy. Bradley Chubb, they just overpaid for no reason after trading a first-round pick for him. That was a stupid trade by them. It seems like they're panicking on that side of the ball. And the other thing with Dolphins fans that drives me nuts is Christian Wilkins is an elite football player. And when he was on the Dolphins fans would tell you Christian Wilkins was an elite football player. Now that he's gone, he's gone away. He went and got paid by the Raiders. Yep. Dolphins fans will tell you, no, that dude sucked, man. Like, he wasn't very good. Like, we have Benito Jones now. We have Tyler Tart. Like, we'll be just fine. It's like you will not. I like Zach Seiler. I like him.
Yeah,
solid football player.
Good player.
Christian Wilkins was the spoon that stirred that soup, and that spoon's now gone, and they're trying to stir with a freaking butter knife at this point because this defensive roster is just simply not great. A couple other things to throw out there. Jordan Poyer, Bills fans love him. I love him too.
Yeah.
Not the Poyer he was, again, years and years ago. Dolphins fans think he is 2019, 2020 Jordan Poyer, which is wrong. Jordan Brooks, tackle machine. I like Jerome Baker better than Jordan Brooks, but that's a whole nother thing to talk about. And Kendall Fuller, they just suddenly think he's going to be better than X was for them. Kendall Fuller might be very good this year. He's also coming off the worst season of his entire career. So I look at this defensive roster, and they now have a new defensive coach. Like, I don't know what I'm looking. Like, this defense probably going to be the same, if not worse, and that offense probably going to be the same, if not worse. To your point, I don't know why I should think that they're going to be any better than they were last year, which is why my best case scenario for them is 1 win in the playoffs, along with the division title, let's say. So say they win the division, say they win 1 game, they ain't winning the Super Bowl. They're not going to the AFC Championship. Like, they're just not that team. They're not good enough to do that. And I don't understand why Dolphins fans are harping on this idea that they are. And they have so many contracts coming due in the next 2 years. And who knows, now that Jared Goff got paid damn near $55 million a year, I pray to God they pay Tua $60 million a year. I would be so happy.
If they pay Tua the type of money that he's expected to be paid, I will be very, very happy. I will be so deliriously happy that another team paid a quarterback that much money in my own division. I will be so happy. Congratulations on mediocrity for the rest. Congratulations on second place finishes for most of your career. Just good job, guys. Glad you feel like you're willing to just cap yourself. It's totally fine. It's totally fine. Do it. I'm begging you to do it. But the thing that they can really realistically on offense, what they can improve on is just running the ball better. Like, maybe not even better, just running the ball more. Yeah. There's times where it really feels like Mike McDaniel is like trying to prove to everyone how good Tua is.
Oh, 100%.
And you don't have to do that, man. Like, we know there are things that you can do. I get it. Just run the ball a little bit better. Run the ball a little bit more. And the funny thing is, they have Raheem Mostert, who led the league in rushing touchdowns last year, had a ton of touchdowns. Devon Achane, again, when he was healthy, was a very good player for them. A very good player, very electric, really good with the ball in his hands. Then they draft Jalen Wright, who just sort of seems like Devon Achane again. And like on the one hand, it's sort of like, oh gosh, now they have 2 Devon Achans or Achan types, and it's like that's really terrifying. And on the other hand, it's like, okay, but if Raheem Mostert is not healthy, which is possible, he's over 30 years old and has a physical style of running. If he's not healthy, then you're really one-dimensional as a run game, and that's a tough pill to swallow when you choose not to run the ball as much as you probably should. I don't really get the plan here. The what they've done with their running back room suggests to me that they think how they go about running the ball and their ratio running the ball to passing the ball is totally fine. And I don't really get that.
Yeah, and Tyreek's also another year older. Tyreek's still one of the best wide receivers in football. I'm not implying that he isn't that, but he's getting older, and his game is predicated on speed and agility. That wears as time wears on. So there's a hill coming at some point for Tyreek Hill. I'm not saying it'll be this year.
In the same way where I'm not going to predict that the Bills are not going to win this division, or I'm not going to predict that the Jets defense is going to fall off this year, I'm not going to predict that Tyreek Hill is going to fall off until I actually see him fall off.
Nor should you. But them going and getting Jalen Wright and trading a third next year to get him, the thing that excites me about that is taking the ball out of Tyreek Hill's hand more. Like, they went and drafted or signed Odell Beckham for an upside of $8 million. I have tweets going back to January where I'm like, please sign Odell Beckham, Dolphins, please, because I don't want him. I hope you guys get him, because he's not the OBJ he was when he made that one-handed catch for the Giants years and years and years and years and years ago.
I was a freshman in college, by the way, when that happened. Yeah.
And throw it to OBJ. I hope they do. I hope OBJ has 80 catches this year, because if he has 80 catches, Tyreek Hill will have less. And I'm more scared of the ball in Tyreek's hand than I am in OBJ's.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. 100%. So, there's a chance where maybe this is something that happens. Let me throw this out here. Okay. So, the last 2 seasons, they've started off hot, especially offensively. They start off hot, and then they fizzle down the stretch and do just enough to sneak their way into the playoffs. Given the injuries that they have on defense and the guys that are coming back from injuries, and the fact that they don't have Christian Wilkins and a new defensive coordinator, maybe they don't start hot this year. Maybe this year they start off a little slower, and maybe that forces McDaniel to look at things in a different way than he has had to in previous years. And if that's the case, if that happens, then maybe you look at a team that is a bit stronger down the stretch than they have been in the past, and maybe that propels them not only into the playoffs, but like you said, a playoff win as the best case scenario for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. There's one major concern here. I think that the reason I think one playoff win is where they're kind of going to max out is because they're going to have to go on the road at some point. And they're going to have to go to Kansas City, or they're going to have to go to Baltimore, or they're going to have to come to Buffalo. And when they go there, they're going to play in weather that they're not used to playing in, regardless of what they're playing at the end of the year. And they're not built to play in that. If you look at that defense in particular, they're legitimately not built to stop the run. I don't know how they expect to stop the run. Like, Kendall Fuller and Jalen Ramsey aren't coming up at the age of 30 trying to stop the run. Poyer, not the player he was able to stop the run. And now no Christian Wilkins. That defensive line's literally built to rush the pass. So when you get to those winter games or those late season games where teams are like, we're going to run the ball because we're going to beat the shit out of you, this team just isn't going to be able to compete with that. And then if you put Tua in a game where he has to throw in inclement weather, he's proven time and time again, one, in a game where he has to throw in inclement weather, or in a game where he has to win the game to continue their season, he can't do it. Like I said, the Dolphins, their ceiling is that one playoff win. I like the idea that you're kind of putting out there, though, that they might not start hot, because we've kind of seen the gambit here, right? We've seen what they do. We've seen the way their offense works, and they might change up their defense, but people are joking themselves that they think this defense is more talented this season than it was last, because it just simply, you don't lose Christian Wilkins and your defense is more talented. And I saw a comment that said, I was trying to find it, about Stephon Diggs. And he's right, is we are being hypocritical if we say that losing Diggs, the Bills offense could be better. Look, I don't think the Bills offense is going to be better without Diggs. I have to see a lot more. But you also have multiple wide receivers on the football field at a point in time. Christian Wilkins was their version of Josh Allen on defense. He was their best single player on that side of the ball. Josh Allen is the Bills' best single player on offense. So you kind of, it's a little bit different, but the point does make sense.
And sort of going back, like when we talk about Christian Wilkins, right? Like there are plays that Christian Wilkins makes on his own that are impressive and are things that you see on the field and during a broadcast that you just immediately pop out to you. But the value that Christian Wilkins brings is that plus all the stuff that you don't see, all the stuff that you just sort of overlook as the game goes on during the initial broadcast that you're not really focused on. All that other stuff allows other players to play at such a high level. And they don't have that guy right now. Benito Jones is not that guy. Deshaun Hand is not that guy. They don't have this sort of guy. And when you don't have that guy in the middle, your linebackers are going to suffer. They still have David Long Jr., who's very, very good. Like you said, Jordan Brooks, tackling machine. It's not a bad player. He's not a bad player by any means, but he's not a difference maker at linebacker, especially not on his own. Zach Seiler is a good player, but when you have both of your starting edge guys coming back from injury, and maybe best case scenario for those two guys, right, is that they're available in week one or just in that first month of the season, and they're having to rotate them with the rookies. That's best case scenario, though. We're talking about a torn ACL late in the year and a torn Achilles also pretty late in the year. This is not some easy thing to come back from. These are both major issues that they're going to have to contend with. And I think that it's very, very possible that this team, unlike previous years, they could get off to a pretty slow start. And it could end up being something that galvanizes them and forces them to make changes, particularly on offense, that they have needed to make changes to. It might just be something that dooms them before they can even get the plane off the ground, right? Like it just, that I feel again, I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around it, but I feel in some ways more hopeful about the Jets season than I do the Dolphins season. In some ways.
And I think like in this entire discussion, like the one thing that was interesting as we were talking through it that I found was we have keys for every team. For the Jets, it's Aaron Rodgers. What is Aaron Rodgers?
Sure.
For the Patriots, a little different because we don't think they're competing, but it's that defense can steal games, so that defense is a key. And then Drake May, like, can he play at a high level?
There's more unknowns for the Patriots, and but there's still something that we feel confident in, and that is the talent that they have on defense.
For sure. For the Bills, though, it's Josh Allen. How far can he take them? And also, how far can Sean McDermott take that defense? For this team, this defense is so unknown, and it's not Tua. It's not Tua on the offensive side of the ball. It's Tyreek Hill. How far can Tyreek Hill take them? And if you can find a way to shut down Tyreek Hill, which incidentally, Sean McDermott's done a pretty damn good job of that against the Dolphins during the Tyreek Hill era, then you can beat this team. Like, so Tua needs to take a step forward and Josh needs to take a step back, which isn't impossible because, like I said, maybe Josh takes a step back this year without Stephon Diggs. And maybe Tua takes another step forward this year for whatever reason. That's how the Dolphins go and win the AFC East. It's possible. I'm not going to bet on it, but that's their best case scenario.
I agree. All right. I think that's it. I think that's all I got. I think that's all you got. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Always a great time just to be able to talk about football, talk about the Bills, talk about the AFC East. Always fun to do this with you guys. If you enjoyed this show, please hit like, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. If you are listening to this afterwards, like the show, rate and review on whatever platform you're on, whether that's iTunes, Spotify, etc. Whatever you're on, just hit us with a review, and share us with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. It's always great to see the support that you guys have shown. We're happy to be able to do this with you guys, especially in the off season. We always appreciate all the support that you guys give us during the off season. If you like this content and the stuff that we were able to talk about on this show, Air Raid Hour starts in about 25 minutes. You can catch them. They always have some good stuff to say. Under Review tomorrow night with Joe DeRosa. Disguised Coverage comes on after that with Anthony Prohaska. He comes on Wednesdays, or at least most Wednesdays. I think, I don't know if Eric is still on vacation or not. And so they do the film room on Wednesdays. The Cover One flagship show with our friends Greg and Aaron. They're on at 9 on Wednesdays. Thomas on Thursdays does Buffalo Late Night. You've got John and Daniel doing Cover One Draft Weekly over at the Cover One College Football channel, which is a separate channel. So if you're not subscribed to that, go subscribe to that now. You got Chris Chews doing fantasy content at Cover One Fantasy. He churns out videos every single day. Always good stuff. So give him some love over there as well. And if all of that is not enough support, you can also subscribe to OnePass. It is our subscription service. It is $60 a year. Pay no attention to the 57 number. It is actually $60. But it's still the best value for content in the Bills sphere that you can possibly get. It's also just some of the best outright football content that you can get, period. It's a great community that is now on Discord. It is also not on Slack. We really got to update this graphic. There's too many things that are wrong now. I gotta see if there's an updated graphic that we can get for this. You also get T-shirt and decal. We just had a contest or a giveaway contest for where some people got various things, including a PS5. Somebody just straight up got a PS5 because they became a OnePass subscriber. Yeah. You can pay $500 for a PS5, or you can try to win one by signing up for $60 a year with OnePass. So, think about that. Economy stuff. If you want a PS5, this is the way to get it. Maybe. And you get to support us and all the stuff that we do, and we're always appreciative of that. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on the old Twitters, drinking always, tweeting nonsense. And I'm not going to break the URL that I bought, but I bought a new website this past weekend. Hopefully I can debut that before next week's episode. We'll see.
You all can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy on Twitter. Thank you all for joining us tonight. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.